Zenos was a bum who got kicked out by his party. Unaware that he is actually an S-rank healer. Now jobless, he decides restart his life by opening up a clinic, but ends up accidentally raising up powerful beast girls instead. On the day he was kicked out of his party, he was given a gold coin by Aston, the party leader, who said it was his severance pay for all the time he spent doing nothing in their party. Zenos tried to plead his case, but they laughed him off and warned him never to mention that he used to be part of their party, so he took the money and left. Meanwhile, in another part of town, a young elf named Lily was being manhandled by some slavers, and when she fought back, one of the slavers stabbed her, causing his partner to call him out for ruining their merchandise. As they argued over this, Zenos walked up behind them, and when he saw the dying girl, he offered to buy her from them with his severance pay. After they took the money and left, Zenos approached Lily and healed her within seconds. This surprised her as she thought she was surely bound for the afterlife. She was amazed by how easily he healed her, even without a long incantation, and as she cried, she thanked him for giving her a second chance at life and then introduced herself to him. When she asked who he was, Zenos introduced himself as a self-taught healer with no healing license, making it clear that he was a nobody. Just then, her stomach growled, so he offered to get her some new clothes and something to eat. Later on, they sat together in a restaurant, and as Lily ate happily, she asked Zenos why he wasn't eating. He claimed it was because he wasn't hungry. But the truth was, his finances had more shades of red than a toxic ex. Curious, Lily asked what he did for work, and Zenos admitted that he'd just been kicked out of his old adventuring party and was between jobs. The next moment, a lizardman named Zonde walked in with an injured arm. Zenos noted that his injury was caused by a magic gun and went to work fixing him up immediately. When he finished, Zendo was stunned and asked who he was, so Lily introduced Zenos as a low-budget healer. However, Zendo claimed he had never heard of such a powerful healer, and in the excitement, the grateful Zendo paid Zenos a few gold pieces and then left, promising not to forget him. This left Zenos momentarily stunned, and when he realized that it was normal to get paid for doing stuff like that, he declared that he would open a healing clinic. However, since he didn't have a license, he said it would be an underground clinic. Lily insisted on becoming his assistant, and when he tried to refuse, she reminded him that he was her master, so he agreed to let her join him. After, they went to the abandoned part of the city to look for a place to run the clinic and came upon an old house which was still intact. A frightened Lily warned Zenos that places like that were usually home to wraiths, but Zenos didn't care. When he went into the house, Lily followed close behind and lit the place up using light magic. As they looked around, a wraith named Carmilla showed up and tried to attack them, but Zenos repelled her using his healing magic. He then apologized to Carmilla for suddenly barging into her home, but said he couldn't leave because it was the only prime property in the area and proposed that she take them in as tenants. Of course, Carmilla wasn't interested and summoned more wraiths to kick them out, but Zenos easily dispersed them at the same time. Realizing that she couldn't defeat him, Carmilla agreed to let them stay on the condition that they weren't allowed on the second floor. The following morning, after they finished setting up the clinic, Zendo came in with his sister Zofia, who also had a gunshot wound. After examining the wound, Zenos informed Zofia that he would have to amputate her arm and charged her 1,000,000 yen to do it. Zofia told Zenos he was pretty ballsy charging her such a fee because he knew she was Zofia the Tornado. Hearing this, Zenos realized that he was in the presence of one of the 3 slum bosses and the leader of the lizardmen, who was more or less a low-budget Robin Hood. Zenos explained that he wouldn't just be cutting off her arm, but also regenerating it, which was pretty much a hassle, so he wouldn't do it for free. He added how he swore never to work for free, but she was already glitching as she claimed it was impossible for any healer to regenerate an arm. Seeing how confident he was, Zofia agreed to allow him to do his thing. To begin, he summoned a scalpel made from his mana, which she also claimed to have never seen, and while he performed the amputation, he also numbed the pain with healing magic. He then combined defensive magic and multiple healing spells to regenerate the arm from bones to muscles and skin, surprising Zofia, who commended him for being a world-class healer. Just then, Zendo noticed Carmilla hanging upside down from the roof and asked who she was. Zenos explained that she was their housemate, and the boy was surprised to learn that he was living with a wraith. After, Zofia said she would be sending her people to Zenos for treatment. Days later, while Lily and Zenos were discussing the ongoing turf war between the lizardmen, orcs, and werewolves, their door was suddenly kicked open by some werewolves who waltzed in like they owned the place. Their leader, Linga, said she'd come for him because his healing of the lizardmen had given them an edge over her people in the war, and she didn't like that. She immediately attacked him with an axe, but to her surprise, it shattered against his defensive barrier. Zenos then instructed Lily to go wait in the back room while he handled their guests, and after she left, Linga ordered her men to attack Zenos. As expected, they couldn't hurt him, And when Linga realized that they were dealing with a rip-off Gojo, she ordered her men to trash the place instead. Zenos tried to talk them out of it, but they refused to listen until Carmilla showed up, wanting to curse them for messing with her place. Zenos calmly asked her to back down, and when Linga saw that Carmilla listened, she got on all fours and began apologizing. It turned out that werewolves feared wraiths, and seeing as he commanded one, she concluded he was someone they couldn't mess with and forced her men to also apologize. A few days later, an orc came looking for Zenos so he could follow him to attend to Loa, the leader of the orcs. Zenos agreed to go with the orc after learning that Loa's condition was serious, but when they arrived, he was surprised to see her sitting pretty on her throne. On the other hand, Loa was glad to finally meet the famous underground doctor that the lizardmen and werewolves had been raving about for a while. She then asked if he could tell why she was unable to move from her position. So Zenos moved closer to examine her by scanning her body for external injuries. This allowed him to discover that she had ingested a mana stone, and Loa admitted that she'd mistakenly eaten it because she was hungry. He called her a dumb idiot for making such a mistake, but said she had nothing to worry about, as it would come out when she went to the toilet. When he began walking away, Loa called out to him, saying that the stone would soon explode in her belly because she chewed part of it. She had already accepted her fate, but her men were being stubborn by refusing to leave her side, so she wanted to pass on their fortune to someone who would use it well, and Zenos was the lucky fellow. Instead of being excited that he was about to inherit a fortune, Zenos equipped his scalpel and removed the mana stone in under a minute, surprising Loa and her people. To prevent it from blowing the entire place up, he clamped his hands, which he protected with defensive magic over it. The orcs were stunned that he was unhurt, but Zenos brushed it aside like it was nothing and handed back the key to their fortune to Loa, saying the fee was too much for the work he'd done. Impressed by his humility, Loa laughed and declared that she liked Zenos, promising him that the orcs owed him a great debt. Zenos said he didn't need anything from them, but Loa wasn't listening and told him that she would send her people to act as security for his clinic. Days later at night, a pouting Lily pointed out that since Zenos had befriended the Slum kingpins, they had been dropping by the clinic a lot. Zenos agreed, saying it was strange that they always dropped by even though they had no injuries, which surprised Lily, as it was clear that the dense guy hadn't clocked the reason yet. Just then, Carmilla spoke up and revealed that it was because his natural Riz had pulled the three baddies. She also predicted that they would wage a war over him soon, but Zenos assumed Carmilla was just cloning and refused to be bothered by what she had said. However, the next day, all three bosses showed up at different times and informed him that they were declaring war on the others, just like Carmilla had predicted. The following day, Zenos went to the abandoned Colosseum to watch the fight, and assured the groups that he hadn't come to stop them. Taking his words as approval, Sophia declared that whoever survived the battle would claim Zenos as theirs, and the other two agreed. Following this, the fight began and dragged on for the rest of the day until someone pointed out that no one seemed to be seriously hurt, even though they had been dealing serious blows to each other. It was at that moment that they realized that Zenos had been healing them the entire time. So Lo pointed out that if they kept going, the fighting would never end. Zenos agreed with the muscle mummy and said that they could carry on if they were still bent on fighting, but made it clear that they would only be racking up their bill because he wasn't doing a pro bono healing gig. This made the girls laugh, but they agreed that continuing the fight was pointless and decided to call a truce, even though they would still be fighting for Zenos. Lily then asked Zenos why he'd intervened and stopped the war, and he explained that his master once told him that a first-rate healer was someone who could make the world a better place. This made Lily realize that even though Zenos was as greedy as much crabs, he was willing to sacrifice his source of income for peace to reign, and that made her admire him even more, so she told him she liked him. Zenos assumed she was referring to a platonic type of like, and said he also liked her, causing poor Lily to pout because there was no point explaining feelings to a person who was denser than Luffy and Goku put together. Weeks later, the division commander of the Royal Knights summoned Krishna, his vice commander, and informed her about the rumors that the turf war in the slums had calmed down. Krishna didn't think this was possible as the feud between the three factions had gone on longer than your last relationship, but the commander didn't want to dismiss the rumors as baseless. He worried that if the rumors turned out to be true, the kingdom would be in trouble, as the constant fighting between the demi-humans distracted the common folk from all the problems the kingdom was facing. He didn't want anything that would make the people question the king, so he ordered Krishna to investigate the third party, who was said to have single-handedly ended the long-standing feud. At the same time, Zenos sneezed because he was being talked about, and when his unofficial harem saw this, they assumed he had a cold. Linga and Lowy offered to warm him up with their plot materials, making Lily feel insecure because she was as plotless as a wall, so she rushed off to prepare some tea. Zenos then told the girls to keep quiet so he could concentrate on fixing Zofia and Zondi up, and when he finished, the lizardmen thanked him. Just then, Lily returned with the tea and asked Zofia how they had gotten injured, since they were no longer at war with the other demi-humans. Zofia explained that they had been injured by the royal knights while doing their jobs as thieves. Curious, Zenos asked if their gunshot injuries were also caused by the knights, and Zofia confirmed that it was the vice commander, who was nicknamed the Iron Rose, who did it to them. Hearing this, Carmilla, the ever-loving doomspeller, predicted that Krishna would become the newest addition to Zenos' married band of overpowered women, but Zenos didn't believe her. Later that day, Krishna ventured into the slums wearing a hood to gather information about Zenos, but the lizardman she questioned refused to tell her anything. She tried forcing him to talk by threatening him with her gun, but the guy called out to Zofia and Zendo, so she fled. As she ran, she wondered how the siblings had recovered from their gunshot wounds, but decided to focus on the issue at hand, her being lost. Having no choice, she wandered around for a bit and ended up at Zenos' clinic, looking for directions back to the city. However, when she saw Lily, she assumed Zenos had kidnapped her and shot him with her magic gun. Lily immediately defended Zenos, saying he had saved her, so Krishna apologized to the elf for jumping to conclusions. Just then, Zenos spoke up from inside the cloud of pixie dust, shocking her. So she asked how he had managed to overcome the effects of her bullet, to which he answered that he used defensive magic. Krishna didn't believe him, as defensive magic wasn't capable of stopping her magic guns, so she moved closer to examine him. Seeing that he was truly fine, she said that the only explanation was that he was some sort of grand sorcerer, but Zenos assured her that his last name wasn't Potter. She then introduced herself to him and asked for his cooperation in carrying out her investigation. Hearing her name surprised Zenos and Lily, but Carmilla, who was dying to say "I told you so," was laughing in the corner where she was hiding away. In the end, Zenos put up a flag to let everyone know to stay away from the clinic, and then sat down to talk to Krishna over tea as she explained the details of her investigation. She said she was in the slums to find and bring the mediator who ended the feud between the factions to book. According to her, someone with the power to unify the slums could pose a threat to the kingdom. Hearing this, Lily came to the mediator's defense, but her words caused Krishna to question whether she knew the mediator's identity. Lily swore that she didn't, and even though it was obvious she was lying, Krishna believed her and said she hadn't expected her investigation to be a walk in the park. Zenos then offered to show her the way back, but as they walked towards the door, she spotted his examination table and asked why it was there. Zenos lied and claimed he wanted to throw it out, so Krishna asked him to let her use it for the time being. She explained that she needed a base of operations during the course of her investigation and offered to pay him for letting her crash there. Having no choice, Zenos agreed, and they went back to drink more tea with Lily, who was jealous that the night was staying over. She tried to prove to Krishna that she and Zenos were an item by making him do stuff for her and vice versa, but Krishna honestly didn't care, which annoyed her. As a final resolve, she tried to pull a seductive move, which Carmilla had taught her, but ended up falling asleep in Zenos' lap and had to be taken to bed. When Zenos returned to where Krishna was, the vice commander asked if he knew the identity of the slavers he had saved Lily from, and he said no. She wasn't thrilled with the answer, as she'd hoped to get some answers regarding the trafficking situation in the kingdom. Changing the topic, she asked if it was possible for a healer to fully regenerate an arm, because she'd noticed that Sophia's arm was fully healed even though she had left her severely injured. She was sure that the mediator was the one behind it and swore that she would take him in at all costs. From the way she spoke, Zenos deduced that she disliked the slums, so he asked why, and she said it was because her mother had died there. The woman spent her days helping the poor, but one day she was attacked by someone trying to steal her ring and died. So Krishna decided that she would become an invisible hero, delivering justice to the criminals in the slums to prevent another person from suffering the same fate. Her determination helped her rise in ranks quickly, and that was how she became the youngest vice commander in the history of the Royal Knights. Her unbendable will regarding her duties earned her the nickname Iron Rose, but some called her by that name because her face was like an iron mask, since she'd had trouble smiling ever since the day her mother died. The following day, Krishna left to carry out her investigation, so Zenos took down the flag. However, while he was attending to Zofia, Krishna returned. As soon as both women saw each other, they pulled out their weapons and demanded to know what the other was doing there. Lily quickly intervened, explaining that Zofia had gotten lost and had come to them for directions, but that did nothing to reduce the tension. Krishna questioned Zofia about her arm and tried to find out who the mediator was by making Zofia angry, but the girl was far too smart to be manipulated. She quickly switched topics and told Krishna to stop sniffing around the slums for the trafficking ring because the true mastermind was a noble named Calendar. Krishna didn't believe her, and when it looked like things were about to get heated, Zenos stepped between them and revealed to Krishna that he was the mediator she was searching for. Krishna didn't believe him and assumed he was just saying that because he had taken sides with the demi-humans and the mediator, so she left. Lily rushed outside to see where she went and told Zenos that the knight was heading in the opposite direction from the slums, making him realize that she was heading to investigate Calendar. Shortly after that, Krishna arrived at Calendar's estate and convinced him to allow her to do a security check. As she was rounding up, she excused herself, saying she was going to the bathroom, but instead went to investigate the part of the house where she noticed that many guards were stationed. To her surprise, she discovered an underground dungeon where the missing children were being kept. As she tried to convince the children that she would get them out, Calendar suddenly showed up and shot her with her gun. He then gave the usual villain speech, but before he could finish her off, Zenos and Zofia arrived. The nobleman became annoyed that they were trespassing on his property and tried to shoot Zenos, but his defensive magic prevented him from getting hurt. Realizing he was about to get cooked, the man tried to escape but fell and lost the gun, which Zenos picked up and aimed at him. Immediately, Calendar started pleading with Zenos to spare his life, but his cries fell on deaf ears as Zenos was pissed by what he'd done to the kids. The next moment, he shot the man, but limited the force so that only his clothes were blown off as he passed out from shock. He then healed Krishna, whose arm and side had been torn off by the impact of the shot from Calendar, and she finally accepted that he was the mediator. Eventually, with the help of the lizardman, they got the kids out, and as Zofia and Zenos tried to leave, Krishna stopped them to ask Zenos why he had saved her. He told her it was because she still owed him for using the bed at his clinic. So she burst out laughing, and he pointed out that she wasn't an emotionless porcelain doll after all. A few days later, while Zenos and Lily walked through the slums, they passed by a place which had him reminiscing about when he met Aston. The pompous guy had come looking for someone to complete his adventurer's party, and had only approached Zenos because he was the only one who didn't. Looked like he was on the verge of death. As time went on, Zenos worked hard to help Aston whenever they went on quests. He healed him when he got injured and even gave him some boosts to help him fight better, but Aston believed he'd done all that by himself and decided to give Zenos the boot. Back in the present, Zenos' old party went to a cave to complete a quest for a noble named Fennel, because they wanted to be in the big leagues. The overconfident lot went in believing that the quest would be a walk in the park, but when they came face to face with the firefoxes they were supposed to hunt, they quickly realized they were cooked. Fortunately, they managed to escape even though one of them was badly injured, and Aston blamed his member for their failure. Andrus clapped back, saying he hadn't done much either. But before he could respond, Guile asked if their past victories might have been because Zenos had been healing them. Aston said it was impossible, but agreed that they needed a healer on the team and said they would return after finding one. 10 days later, they returned with a healer named Umman, but this didn't help their cause one bit. During the fight, Andrus, the magic caster, got hit by a fireball, so Umman started healing him and called out to Aston, saying they had to get him to safety. Annoyed, Aston ordered a retreat, and once they were outside, he grabbed Guile, demanding to know why he'd failed to do his job. Umman quickly cut in, saying that Andrus' injury hadn't been caused by anyone's incompetence, and explained that the defensive magic Guile cast was what saved Andrus' life. Still, Aston refused to believe it and demanded that she quickly heal Andrus so they could return to the cave. Umman told him that his request was absurd because even the higher-ranked healers wouldn't be able to restore him without taking him to the hospital. This forced Aston to have a rethink, but his stubbornness refused to allow him to accept that he'd made a mistake by firing Zenos. He asked Umman if someone could have elite healing abilities without having a license, and she said no, further cementing his delusions that Zenos was nothing but a waste of space. Later, when they returned to the city, they were informed by Fennel's servant that their services were no longer required because they failed to complete their quest. Aston desperately pleaded with the man to give them another chance, so he did. After the man left, Guile questioned why he'd done that when their other party members were out of commission, and Aston told him that they would go get Zenos back. He still refused to acknowledge that Zenos had helped them, but figured that having him around would help put them back on top. The next day, they went to the slums to find Zenos, but since they didn't know where to look, they sought out Zofia so they could hire her to find Zenos for them. Once Zofia learned that they were the ungrateful idiots who kicked Zenos out of their party, she told them to hit the road. This prompted them to visit Linga, but the wolf treated them the same way Zofia did, forcing them to turn to Lua, who also did the same thing to them. Annoyed and embarrassed, Aston tried to convince himself that they hadn't turned him away because of Zenos, but he was interrupted by Guile, who spotted Zenos walking with Lily. Immediately he went after Zenos and called out to him, saying he'd come to take him back, but Zenos shocked him by turning him down. When he demanded to know why, Zenos told him it was because his working conditions were trash, and said he'd only return if he agreed to start paying him. Aston refused to agree to his terms, and just as he was telling Zenos that he knew he had nowhere to go, people began calling out to Zenos, thanking him for treating them. Some kids also came to ask Zenos to play with them, and when Aston saw all the love Zenos was getting, his anger multiplied. When Zenos tried to walk away, the self-absorbed idiot tried to convince Zenos to come back to him, but Zenos refused, which further enraged him. He attempted to cut Zenos down, but Krishna suddenly showed up and shot him, so Zenos asked what she was doing in the slums. Krishna explained that she'd come looking for him, prompting Zenos to point out that she was far away from the clinic. Krishna didn't see that as a problem and told him that if it weren't for the fact that she was as directionally challenged as Zoro, he'd be dead. Aston couldn't understand why Krishna was being friendly with a nobody like Zenos, so he forced himself to get up and try to engage Zenos again. Krishna turned to him just then and said she was taking him in for attempted assault, but the coward claimed it was all Guile's idea and ran off before she could stop him. Days later, the girls came to visit Zenos at the clinic and told him about Aston coming to see them. They said they had put tails on Aston and Guile to keep an eye on them, but they managed to give them the slip and haven't shown up anywhere since. Lily said they might have given up and gone home, but Zofia didn't think Aston was the type to give up that easily. As far as she was concerned, he might have gone to the underground guild, which was known for taking on all sorts of jobs, regardless of their nature. Zenos didn't believe Aston would go that far, as it required a lot of money to hire someone from the guild. Carmilla then pointed out that if Aston had come looking to take Zenos back, it meant he was struggling. But Sophia didn't see things their way. She told them about a person everyone referred to as the guide, and said that person would take on any job regardless of whether or not there was money involved. Later on, after the girls left, Lily found Zenos sitting in the clinic alone, so she made him some tea and sat with him. After a while, she fell asleep, so he took her to her room and returned to find Carmilla helping herself to some tea, so he just sat with her. While they chatted, Carmilla learned that Zenos had once tried to revive a corpse, but was stopped by his master, who then taught him to use his healing magic to save people instead. This prompted her to talk about artificial life, which was achieved using ancient demon sorcery to create golems from special mana stones. When Zenos finally got up to clear the table, the house suddenly shook as though an earthquake had struck. However, Carmilla deduced that the source of the tremors had come from the direction of the slums, so she went out to check. To her surprise, she saw that the slums were under attack by a golem. When she and Zenos eventually got there, the place was in ruins, and the golem was still smashing up the place like an angry gorilla. The girls soon joined them and told Zenos that a lot of people were hurt, so he asked them to find and gather all the injured people in one place so he could tend to them. Unknown to them, they were being watched from a distance by a hooded figure, who turned out to be the one responsible for creating the golem. He was impressed that his creation was as destructive as he'd anticipated, but wasn't pleased with the fact that it wasn't as mobile as he'd hoped. Nevertheless, he felt it could get the job done, and wondered how Zenos would react once the people around him started dying. Back in the slums, the three bosses and their uninjured minions worked together to rescue the people trapped under the rubble. They also gathered all those who were injured and took them to Zenos, who used the high heal spell to fix everyone. As he continued healing those who were brought to him, Carmilla noticed Zenos was a little upset and asked why. He said it was because he was working overtime with no pay, and said if he found out who was responsible for the attack, it would be on sight. The subject of his anger was still watching him, and he was amazed that Zenos was capable of healing so many people at the same time. However, he said that all his efforts were in vain because nothing would change until the golem was stopped. Eventually, Zenos finished tending to all the injured persons, and while he was resting, Carmilla told him that the golem would continue rampaging until it fulfilled its orders. With a sigh, Zenos got up and said he was going to fight the golem, which honestly surprised Carmilla, but Sophia and the others insisted on going with him. Zenos accepted their offer, and then asked Carmilla what they had to do to put the golem down. The wraith said they must destroy the magic stone, which made up its core, or else they would just be wasting their time. Armed with this knowledge, Zenos instructed the girls to go to town on the golem, promising to back them up with his magic. The girls immediately charged at the monster, and as they fought it, Zenos began using his boosting magic on them. This practically made them as indestructible as Superman, and they loved it. On the other hand, Zenos maintained a close distance to them to ensure the effectiveness of his boost, as well as to observe the golem. Once he figured out how long it took for it to regenerate, he asked the girls to destroy both of its legs, which they did. However, they noticed at the last second that a girl was hiding in the building next to the golem, and panicked because she was about to become a pancake. Zenos rushed to save her, but before he got to her, the golem had already fallen. Surprisingly, it ensured that its arm didn't crush the girl, which was unusual. Of course, Carmilla pointed this out as Zenos scanned the golem with his magic, and once he discovered something, he asked Carmilla how one would create a golem from an imperfect stone. This question shocked Carmilla, and Zenos confirmed what she was thinking by revealing that Aston was merged with the magic stone and acting as the golem's core. It turned out that he'd gone to see the god and asked for his help to take revenge on Zenos, and the god had decided to slay two birds with one stone by using him to test run his little experiment. From his position, the god watched Zenos and wondered what he'd do now that he discovered the golem's secret. The magic stone was completely fused with Aston, and destroying it meant ending Aston's life, so he was excited to see how everything would play out. Back in the slums, Zenos ordered the girls to fall back, and after they walked away, Carmilla materialized beside him and said she was returning home since the sun was her kryptonite. Once she was gone, Zenos started talking to Aston, trying to see if talk no jutsu was enough to stop him, but soon realized it wasn't because Aston was completely consumed by his rage. Having no choice, he went all Levi on the golem and managed to pry open its chest to reveal Aston, whom he sliced with his mana blade. Seeing this, the guide was disappointed as he expected a more climactic ending, but just as he was about to leave, he realized that Aston was still alive. Zenos was destroying the magic stone and healing Aston at the same time, ensuring that his cuts weren't too deep to do any permanent damage. This was surprising to the guide, who had expected him to be exhausted after healing hundreds of people and even supporting the girls while they fought earlier. Aston soon regained his senses and asked Zenos why he was trying to save him, and Zenos told him it was because he needed to be alive to snitch on the guide. He also said that it was because he was grateful to him for taking him out of the slums and giving him that gold coin, which he'd used to save Lily. However, his main reason for saving him was that he was a healer and healing was what he did best. With that, Zenos delivered the final cut on the stone and saved Aston from the clutches of death. Later, after the golem had turned to a pile of sand, a solemn-looking Aston finally admitted that Zenos was the main character and begrudgingly acknowledged his abilities. When he began begging him to forgive him for all the things he'd done to him in the past, Zenos told him to hold his head high so he could rearrange his guts, and not in an enjoyable way. Aston tried backing away and pleading his case, but Zenos was determined to get his revenge and did so with one punch, which knocked him out instantly. When he eventually woke up, Krishna was the one standing over him. So he asked where Zenos was. She told him that the healer had gone home and then placed him under arrest for multiple crimes, including public nudity, since Zenos' punch had been so powerful that it stripped him bare. She also relayed Zenos' message, which said that he'd taken Aston's sword as payment and gave him a gold coin, which Zenos had left as his severance pay. Seeing the coin made Aston burst into tears because never in his life had he thought that Zenos would offer him a lifeline. At the same time, Zenos ran into the girls on his way home, and they insisted on carrying him the rest of the way, so he let them. Meanwhile, the guide decided it was time for him to go into hiding and said he was looking forward to playing with Zenos again. Days later, Krishna dropped by the clinic to update Zenos on how the investigation to find the guide was going. She said they had gone to the place where Aston met him, but saw that he'd already abandoned the place. Zofia and the others, who also dropped by, said they'd also done some digging and learned that the guide was a lone wolf who had only started visiting the guild recently. Krishna didn't appreciate their input, so she made a comment which almost sparked an argument. After Zenos intervened, he pointed out how weird it was that they were having a conversation without facing each other. Krishna answered that it was the best way because she would never stoop so low as to associate with criminals. This almost caused an argument, so Zenos kicked the four of them out. Lily then approached him and tried to suggest that they go to a hot spring, but before she could say anything, Zofia returned and stole her thunder. After she left, Linga, Lo, and Krishna all returned one after the other to suggest the same thing, and Zenos nearly lost it. Once he was alone with Lily again, he asked what she'd been trying to tell him, but the girl angrily snapped at him. That night, while Zenos was relaxing in the men's bath at the hot spring, Zofia came in and joined him in the bath. While they talked, he noticed that she'd gotten closer to him, and when he pointed it out, she tried to forcefully take his sausage. Just then, Linga barged into the place, and after scolding Zofia for trying to taste Zenos' exotic milk before her, she feigned dizziness and attempted to fall into Zenos' arms, but Zofia got in her way. While the two struggled against each other, an unclad Loe suddenly came up out of the water and began doing poses to entice Zenos. Seeing this, he quickly looked away to prevent his power tool from coming on.
Come on, man.
But Linga and Zofia pounced on her. Krishna came in. She scolded them for being shameless, but the girls told her she wasn't any different, and as they pulled her into their struggle ring, Zenos screamed at them to get out. When they returned to the women's bath, they walked past Umin, who noted that they were a strange, mismatched group. After the girls got in the water, Loa began doing her judo poses again, causing Lily, who had been sitting quietly beside to sigh sadly. She didn't like how she was the only one without melons in the group, but when she noticed that was her sister in plotlessness, she cheered up and went into the water. Carmilla showed up just then and gave her some hope by saying that Zenos might be the type who didn't discriminate against plots. Once Lily felt better, Carmilla played a trick on her by pretending to ascend. Her little trick caught Umman's attention, and the healer immediately tried to exorcise her, so she yeeted into the men's bath, much to Zenos' annoyance. Later on, the group had dinner in their room, but the stubborn Krishna still refused to sit at the same table with the girls, even when Zenos invited her to. After dinner, Zenos put Lily to bed and joined Carmilla for a late-night drink, and as they talked, he told her how the girls turned dinner into a drinking contest and passed out. Carmilla laughed at this and advised him to enjoy the lively moments while they lasted, predicting that he would be dragged into something crazy soon. Changing the topic, Zenos asked how she'd gotten to the hot spring, and she pointed at a staff which Lily had brought with her, explaining that she was bound to it. This prompted Zenos to ask if it belonged to her while she was still alive, but Carmilla managed to evade answering, so he didn't pry. The following morning, an explosion occurred in the kitchen, injuring the cook badly, and even though was the first one on the scene, she couldn't heal him fully. When Zenos came along, she pleaded with him to help her get the man to the nearest hospital, but Zenos said there was no need for that and left with Lily. The next moment, the man sat up, and as his wife hugged him, realized that Zenos had healed him before he left, making her wonder if he was a saint or an elite healer. Later that day, when she returned to the Royal Hospital, she told Becker, her supervisor, what had happened, and the man became intrigued. He asked if she could remember anything significant about Zenos, and she answered that he wore a black overcoat. Hearing this, Becker got up and said they had to search for Zenos, surprising her because he'd initially said there wasn't a need to do that. Days later, Zondes showed up with a barely conscious Becker and told Zenos that he had collapsed after coughing up a ton of blood. He put Becker on the examination bed, and after Zenos did a quick scan, he learned that Becker was suffering from a disease called the red lung. He asked Lily and Zonde to step back as the disease was highly contagious, but was puzzled as to how Becker contracted it since there was a cure for it. The next moment, Becker sat up and, after commending Zenos for his spot-on diagnosis, he introduced himself as an elite healer from the Royal Hospital. The next moment, barged in and started scolding Becker for his ridiculous plan to find Zenos by making himself sick. Becker tried defending his actions, but the next moment, he suddenly coughed up blood. So he pulled out a vial containing some medicine and drank from it. He then explained to Zenos that he had taken a drug which would cause the same symptoms as the red lung, but assured him that he would be fine because he'd taken the antidote. Curious, Zenos asked where he'd gotten the drug, and Becker revealed that he'd made it when he was trying to find the cure for the red lung disease. He then admitted that he'd come looking for Zenos after hearing he had a black overcoat because he thought he was someone he knew. Zenos explained that the coat used to belong to his master, so Becker asked for his master's name, and Zenos admitted that his master never told him. After hearing this, Becker invited Zenos to come work at the Royal Hospital and help him with the case. Before Zenos could respond, the three slum bosses walked in and told Becker that they wouldn't let him take Zenos away. To reassure them that he meant no harm, the doctor offered to make the deal with Zenos an official one and promised that in exchange, he would tell him everything he knew about his master. The girls didn't want him to take the deal, but Zenos was curious, so he accepted it anyway. When he arrived at the Royal Hospital days later, Zenos was left in awe by how magnificent it was, while and Becker guided him to Becker's office. After arriving at the office, Becker went over their plan, explaining that he wanted Zenos to help locate one of his students who had gone missing recently. He'd gotten Zenos into the Royal Hospital as a special research student, giving him the privilege to go anywhere without drawing suspicion to himself. After the briefing, took Zenos to his dorm, where Lily was waiting, and when he asked why she was there, said that Becker had signed off on her being there. According to the dorm rules, family members were allowed to cohabit, and Lily was there as Zenos' sister, even though the silly girl wished they had passed her off as his wife. Zenos thanked for bringing Lily, and after she left, Lily tried to act like a waifu, but Zenos quickly shut her down. He then asked where she'd learned such absurd things, and before she could respond, Carmilla materialized on the couch, claiming credit for it. He wasn't surprised to see her, but advised her not to leave the dorm if she didn't want to be exorcised. Later on, Zenos went to have lunch with and they discussed a Fred, the missing person he was supposed to find. While they were talking, their attention was drawn to the large group of healers who walked into the cafeteria. Their leader was the vice director of the hospital, Professor Goldrin, who, according to was a Class 7 advanced healer. Seeing as Zenos didn't understand what she meant, she explained that each healing level, from beginner to advanced, was further split into 7 classes. A Class 7 advanced healer was the highest level a healer could attain without becoming an elite healer. Zenos easily absorbed her explanation, and then asked why Goldrin was rolling with a large crowd, to which she answered that it was because he was in the running for the next hospital director. Apparently, he was more interested in advancing his political career and had been prioritizing the nobility over the common folk. This made Zenos say he would stay clear of Goldrin, but told him that he couldn't do that. She and Becker believed Alfred's disappearance had something to do with Goldrin, and the only way to confirm it was to get someone into Goldrin's inner circle. That someone was Zenos, and assured him that with his skill, he'd be invited to join Goldrin's group in no time. They were still talking about this when a boy named Crescent suddenly showed up at their table and started yapping like an idiot. Wasn't too happy to see him, and when he realized that Zenos was ignoring his stupid self, he told him to do his best not to embarrass Becker and then walked away. Once he was out of earshot, Zenos asked who he was, and she explained that he was a half-baked healer who thought he was the next Doctor Strange because he was scouted to join Goldrin's group. Realizing he had nothing to worry about, Zenos left for class, and on his way, he reminisced about his past. After his master smacked him on the head for trying to resurrect a dead man, the man took him under his wing and taught him how to be a real healer. There was another student besides him whose name was Veritra, and their master ensured that he drilled the principles of being a healer into their minds. Back in the present, Zenos sat in class while a lecture on the undead was going on. The teacher told them that wraiths were the most powerful undead beings and added that the ones who could speak were the worst of the lot. This made Zenos think about Carmilla, but he decided to keep his mouth shut to be on the safe side. When the teacher asked if any of them had ever fought the undead before, Crescent stood up and started bragging about how he'd slain 30 of them in the past. He then tried to make Zenos feel inferior by nonchalantly asking if he'd also slain an undead before. Zenos answered that his undead body count was around the same number. The only difference was that he'd slain them at once. This statement caught the attention of the teacher, so he engaged Zenos in conversation about the wraith. Crescent didn't appreciate how his thunder was stolen by Zenos, so during the next class, he went to sit next to him and warned him not to spout nonsense just because he wanted to stand out. Soon, the class began, and the teacher taught them about magic circles before asking for a volunteer to come up and draw their best magic circle. Of course, Crescent went up because he liked to show off, and after the teacher commended him for a good job, he offered Zenos up as a sacrificial lamb. Zenos was unfamiliar with magic circles, but he drew the one his master had taught him years ago. When Crescent saw it, he started mocking Zenos, but shut up when the teacher said the circle was beyond anything he'd ever seen. He said the circle would require a lot of mana to activate it, but Zenos shocked him by activating it without any issues. As the man began begging Zenos to join his laboratory, Crescent stood there boiling over in anger. Later that day, just as word reached Goldrin that Zenos was an exceptional student, reports came of undead sightings at a nearby graveyard. The man then ordered that Zenos be included in the group dispatched to handle the undead. At night, Zenos and joined the group led by Crescent at the graveyard for the exorcism of the undead. As expected, the group struggled until Zenos intervened, but Crescent stole the credit for himself. As everyone started walking out of the graveyard, Zenos told Crescent that their job wasn't done, and the next moment, a zombie king emerged from the ground. The other students called out to Crescent, asking him to get rid of the creature since they believed he was the strongest one among them. Crescent looked to for help, but the girl told him to handle things on his own since he claimed to be all-powerful. Having no choice, the terrified boy approached the undead and cast a high heal spell, which barely affected it, so he tried to run away. Told Zenos not to help him, saying he deserved what was happening to him. But Zenos knew she didn't mean what she said. The next second, the zombie king grabbed Crescent and tried to squeeze him like a lemon, so Zenos intervened. However, instead of thanking him, the ungrateful Crescent questioned why Zenos had helped him. This caused an argument between him and but Zenos didn't intervene because he was lost in thought. He figured out that the undead had gathered there because they were drawn to Carmilla, who was a more powerful undead than they were. When Zenos returned to his dorm later, he spoke to Carmilla about it, and the smug wraith told him that she was already aware of it. She asked if he wanted to kick her out to stop the gathering of the undead, and he told her no, saying it was safer to have her by his side instead. His words shocked Lily, who took them out of context and started wishing he'd said he also wanted her to remain at his side. While she was stuck in her delusional fantasies, Zenos noticed that Carmilla had gone quiet and asked if she was fine. She told him that she was, but quickly excused herself because she didn't want him to see how affected she was by what he'd said. The next day, Crescent went to see Goldrin's second secretary, who commended him for vanquishing the undead and the zombie king. Crescent happily accepted all the praise, But when the man said that Zenos had failed to prove himself, he was struck with guilt. To ease his mind, he came clean, confessing that it was Zenos, and not him who vanquished the wraith and the zombie king. Following this, Becker summoned Zenos and to his office and told them that Goldrin's faction was looking to invite Zenos into their ranks. He said he would have an interview with Goldrin, and if the man deemed him worthy enough, he would be accepted into his faction. Zenos wasn't too hyped about this, but since he was committed to the cause, he decided to take one for the team. A little while later, he stood before Goldrin and his second secretary and answered all of Goldrin's questions before he was asked to recreate the magic circle he had done. In class, Zenos did this easily, and after Goldrin examined the drawing, he confirmed that it was a fascinating magic circle and officially welcomed Zenos into his faction. The following day, Zenos joined Goldrin's entourage as the professor made his daily rounds. As they walked around, Crescent told him that he'd put in a good word for him because he wanted to use him to make his way up in the faction. Zenos commended him for his honesty, and as they continued on their way, he asked questions about things he didn't understand. Soon, Zenos noticed that they had stopped moving, so out of curiosity, he snuck to the front to see what the holdup was, even though Crescent told him not to. Upon reaching there, he witnessed Goldrin healing a patient by drawing power from 3 students and became even more curious. When he returned to Crescent's side, he asked him about it, and Crescent explained that Goldrin's specialty was health transfer magic. This was a technique which involved transferring the life force from healthy individuals to sick ones to heal them. Serious injuries required a large number of people, but once the process was completed, the donors only had to deal with a bit of exhaustion. Zenos found the whole thing interesting and said it finally made sense to him why Goldrin was collecting healers like Pokemon cards. Crescent said that wasn't the only reason and repeated what had said about Goldrin trying to secure votes in preparation for the upcoming election for the position of hospital director. He was convinced that Goldrin would win and said he couldn't wait to leech off the man's success like the useless bum he was. Seeing as Crescent was in a chatty mood, Zenos asked if he knew of Fred, and Crescent answered that he did. However, he said he never liked the guy. Hoping to find out more, Zenos pressed on, and Crescent revealed that Fred went missing shortly after getting invited to the dinner party Goldrin occasionally held for his inner circle. Later that day, Zenos dropped by Becker's office and told him what Crescent said about Fred being invited to the dinner party. When he tried to leave, Becker told him that he had to do everything in his power to get invited to the dinner party. Becker then tried to stand up but accidentally bumped against his table, causing some books and coins to fall to the floor. Instead of picking them up, he asked Zenos which coin he'd pick up first if he had to pick the coins off the floor. Before Zenos could respond, Becker asked a second question, wanting to know if Zenos believed all lives should be valued equally. Once again, Becker was prevented from answering, this time by who came in to tell Becker that he was late for his meeting. The following day, Crescent invited Zenos to pet sit Goldrin's dog with him, making Zenos realize that the boy was more or less the errand boy in the faction. As they walked around the hospital, they ran into Goldrin's first secretary, a drunk named Bonds, and Crescent immediately started sucking up to him. Bonds didn't even try to humor him, and after voicing his dislike for Goldrin's dog, he told Crescent that being a professional butt kisser would get him nowhere in life. As he began walking away, he suddenly turned and tossed the bottle he was holding at Crescent, who failed to catch it. Spooked by the sound, Crescent accidentally let go of the dog leash, so the dog ran off. Crescent and Zenos chased after it, but the dog was a track star in the making, so they couldn't catch up with it, and in the end, it got run over by a carriage. Immediately, they rushed to the dog's side, and even though Crescent used the high heel spell to try and save its life, it wasn't enough, so he started panicking. Feeling sorry for him, Zenos stepped in and healed the dog completely, surprising Crescent, who hadn't expected Zenos to have elite-grade healing magic. Later in the evening, when Zenos returned to his dorm, he met waiting outside, and she insisted they go somewhere else to talk. After they had walked far enough, she suddenly apologized to him, saying that if she were more capable, Becker wouldn't have had to recruit him to find out what happened to Fred. Zenos didn't think it was something she had to apologize for and reminded her that he wasn't doing the job for free. Out of curiosity, she asked what type of person his master had been, and Zenos admitted that he didn't know the best way to describe the man. He said the only thing he could tell her was that the man saved his life, and said it was the same thing with her and Becker. She believed she owed Becker her life because he stood by her side and mentored her when she decided to become a healer. Curious, Zenos asked how she came to know Becker, and she revealed that he was her maternal uncle. As they continued talking, admitted that she didn't think her research on drug storage would amount to anything, but Zenos assured her that it would. He advised her to rely on those around her for help because that was what his teacher taught him, and she thanked him for making her feel like less of a failure. On their way back to the dorm, They were stopped by Crescent, who came running towards them and begged Zenos for help. Hours before then, Goldrin returned to his office after having a meeting with Fennel, and when his second secretary asked how it had gone, the professor sighed. Noting that he looked troubled, the secretary asked if something had happened during the meeting, and Goldrin recalled what had happened. Fennel had asked him to examine his daughter Charlotte because she developed a rash on her face, which had gotten bigger in the course of a week. Goldrin deduced it was a case of something called odd face, which wasn't life-threatening, but often left the face deformed. Fennel had pleaded with the professor to do everything within his power to heal his daughter. Back in Goldrin's office, he told himself that the growth had already taken root in the girl's face, so performing a surgery to cut them out was necessary. With enough donors and health transfer magic, the skin could be regenerated. But Fennel had told him that his daughter wouldn't agree to let so many people see her face, so that was out of the question. Trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation gave Goldrin a headache, so he decided to take a break and go see his dog. On the way, he ran into Bonds, who told him that his precious mutt had been run over by a carriage and Goldrin lost it. He grabbed Bonds by the collar, believing him to be responsible for the incident, but Bonds said it wasn't him and told him that the dog sitter had fixed the dog up. Believing his words, Goldrin let go of Bonds and left to find his dog, who was resting in her room. To his surprise, he saw that the dog was completely healed and had no scars and figured he'd found a solution to the odd face problem. Back in Zenos' dorm, Crescent explained that Goldrin wanted him to heal Fennel's daughter because he believed he was the one who healed his dog. Uman suggested that he come clean and tell Goldrin that it was Zenos who healed his dog, but Crescent refused, as this would jeopardize his chances in the faction. He begged Zenos again to help him, even addressing him as his big brother to curry more favor. But Zenos told him he wasn't his brother. Just then, Lily brought them some tea, and when Crescent saw her, his lowly loving degenerate side activated. Uman introduced Lily as Zenos' sister, and when the girl played along, thanking Crescent for looking out for her brother, even though it was the other way around. She then moved closer to Zenos, and from her behavior, Crescent assumed their relationship was on the sibling complex level, so he said something. His statement rubbed Lily the wrong way, and she told Zenos that she didn't want to be around someone as sus as Crescent. The next day, Zenos went with Goldrin and Crescent to do a house call for Fennel's daughter. When Fennel took them to her room and knocked on the door to tell her that the doctor was there to see her, she refused to open up, saying she didn't want the surgery. Goldrin tried to convince her that surgery would go fine, but Charlotte still refused to open up. Seeing this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bag himself a rich wife, Crescent offered to speak with Charlotte. Unfortunately, Charlotte chewed him up and spat him out once she learned that he was just an assistant. After he went back with his tail between his legs, Goldrin signaled for Zenos to try his luck and persuade the girl to unlock her dog. Reluctantly, Zenos approached the door, but unlike everyone else, he didn't try to placate Charlotte and told her that if she didn't remove the growth, she would eventually start looking like an old hag. Everyone was shocked, and just as Goldrin began scolding him for making things worse, Charlotte opened the door. She then allowed them into the room and allowed Goldrin to explain what needed to be done to remove the growth. When Charlotte realized that the only solution was surgery, she declared that she wouldn't do it and started throwing a tantrum. Her father tried to convince her that everything would be fine, but since neither he nor Goldrin could assure her that she wouldn't get a scar, she stormed off. Goldrin immediately signaled for Zenos to go talk to her, so he dutifully went to find the spoiled princess. She was sitting on her veranda, which had so many bird cages, so Zenos decided to use that as a way to bond with her. He noticed one of the birds was injured, so he asked what had happened, and she explained that she'd found it in the garden the previous day. She said the injury was so bad that the bird would never fly again and likened it to herself, saying that her disfigured face would prevent her from living life to the fullest. Instead of sympathizing with her, Zenos asked if she wanted to get better, and didn't stop asking the same question until she lashed out and said she wanted to get better but didn't want any scars. The next moment, the injured bird took flight, and as she watched it in awe, Zenos told her that she too could be healed completely if she put their trust in them. Following this, Charlotte agreed to undergo the surgery and was left in the hands of Goldrin, Zenos, and Crescent by her father. Crescent was afraid that he'd mess up, but Zenos assured him that he'd do fine and promised to guide him every step of the way. When the surgery began, things went smoothly, but Crescent suddenly stopped when he realized that the roots had intertwined with her nerves. He knew that cutting the nerves would permanently disfigure Charlotte, so he pleaded with Goldrin for them to end the surgery and convinced Charlotte to go to the hospital for proper treatment. Goldrin refused and forcefully cut the nerve using Crescent's hand, since he was the one holding the scalpel. The next moment, he started complaining loudly, drawing Fennel's attention. When the man asked what was wrong, he told him that Crescent had caused irreparable damage to Charlotte. Tired of watching the man blame Crescent, Zenos spoke up and told Fennel that everything would be fine. He then took over the surgery, leaving Goldrin and Crescent in awe by the time he finished. Later on, when Charlotte woke up, she immediately picked up a mirror to confirm that her face was back to normal. Once she confirmed it, she shed a few tears and asked her father where the professor was. He told her that he had returned to the hospital to prepare for the elections. Charlotte then suddenly remembered Zenos and asked her father if he knew his name, and the man said no. However, the servant who was around at the time told her. Meanwhile, at the Royal Hospital, Zenos helped Ullman carry Becker's new experimental drugs to a storage room. They were still there when Becker came looking for them, so he could ask Zenos how the surgery had gone. Zenos told him it had gone well, and Becker said he was sure that Goldrin would soon invite him to his dinner party. As if on cue, Crescent came rushing to tell Zenos that they had both been invited to Goldrin's dinner party. Later that night, Zenos, Lily, and Crescent attended the dinner party at Goldrin's home. After dinner, Zenos and Lily mingled with the guests and learned that during the dinner party Fred attended, he spent most of his time looking after Bonds. When they approached him, Zenos asked Bonds questions about what happened that night, and the man admitted that he was too drunk to remember. He said Fred was a good kid and the only one among Goldrin's faction who talked to him because Goldrin had convinced the rest that he was a liar. This statement puzzled Zenos because it made no sense that Goldrin would make Bonds his secretary if he didn't trust him. As if reading his mind, Lily asked Bonds why he became Goldrin's secretary when it was obvious they didn't get along, and Bonds said it was because they go as far back as your hairline in 10 years. When she tried to ask further questions, he told her to stop bugging him and walked away. Zenos thought the guy had been too hammered that day to remember much of anything, but Lily said she was sure he was hiding something. She then went to talk to one of the servants and later returned with 2 wine bottles, saying it was time to get some answers. Once she had gotten Bonds drunk enough, Zenos asked him what had happened on the night Fred attended the dinner party. He answered that they had gone for a walk in the garden, so Zenos suggested that they also do the same. By the time they got outside, Bonds could barely stand on his own, so Zenos supported him. However, the drunk guy still found a way to fall. He even mistook Zenos for Goldrin and said Goldrin was about to move up the ladder because he helped Fennel again. Curious, Zenos asked what he was talking about, but Bonds told him not to act dumb and asked him to remember what happened that night 13 years ago. Playing along, Zenos said he couldn't believe that 13 years had passed already, and Bonds replied that it was on that night that Goldrin's life changed forever. He mentioned an explosion in Fennel, saying it was thanks to his helping the noble that he got his spot as a professor at the Royal Hospital. Before he could say more, he passed out, so Zenos suggested dropping him off with a servant since it was obvious he wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Later, after they returned inside, they tried to piece together what Bonds had told them, but were interrupted by Carmilla's sudden appearance. Zenos told the wraith that she was courting death by being there, but she brushed his words aside and said she'd piece together what Bonds had said. At the same time in the slums, the 3 bosses had broken into Zenos' clinic, and while they were having another pointless argument, one of Zofia's people came to find her. He told her the Zonde had gotten hurt badly while they were working, so she told the guy to get ready, as they were going to find Zenos. Back at Goldrin's mansion, Carmilla gave her version of what she believed happened 13 years ago. She said that on the day of the explosion, Goldrin had saved Fennel's life, and because of that, the man rewarded him by helping him become a professor. However, because the story was kept a secret, Lily said it was most likely that Goldrin took credit for another healer's achievement. She also said that Fred might have gone into hiding to protect himself from danger. Carmilla commended Lily for coming up with such a theory, making the girl feel like Sherlock Holmes, so she said that they could run a detective agency out of the clinic. Before Zenos could tell her she was being delusional, Crescent walked into the room. He told them that he wanted to introduce them to some of the people he had befriended, and while Lily went with him, Zenos stayed back to talk to Carmilla. He had figured out that on the night of the explosion, Goldrin had chosen to save Fennel at the cost of the lives of the other injured people. Carmilla asked what he wanted to do, and he told her that he would report his findings to Becker and let the man handle everything. He then thanked Carmilla for helping him piece things together, but the Cliche Sunder pretended not to want his appreciation. After leaving the room, Zenos joined the other guests on the veranda and learned that a commotion was happening outside. The cause of the commotion was Ullman and the demi-humans who had come looking for Zenos. Goldrin ordered his men to chase them away, but the girls beat up the guards and forced their way in. Lo then called out to Zenos, telling him that Zonde was seriously hurt, and explained that it was Ullman who told them where to find him. Hearing this, Goldrin demanded to know if Zenos was truly associated with demi-humans, but Zenos ignored him to ask about Zonde's condition. Lowy answered that his breathing was shallow, and Sophia got on her knees, apologizing for suddenly showing up, but said the situation was too severe for her to have waited for his return. Zenos told her not to worry about it and said he would be with them shortly, shocking everyone there. Goldrin tried to convince him that he was doing the wrong thing by associating with and helping demi-humans, but Zenos didn't care. He bid Crescent farewell and jumped down with Lily in his arms as they ran off. Goldrin said Zenos was a fool and swore to make sure that he never worked as a healer again. Crescent agreed that Zenos was a fool, but also acknowledged the fact that Zenos was the embodiment of what a true healer should be. He then decided that he wanted to be like Zenos and jumped down too, but before rushing after Zenos, he told Goldrin that he was withdrawing from his faction. By the time he got to where Zenos and the others were, Zenos had already healed Zonde, so Crescent was disappointed. Then started teasing him about what he'd said, and he became embarrassed. The following day, Zenos reported his findings to Becker, and he confirmed that Efred had been involved in an accident 13 years ago. He said that Efred may be planning to take revenge on Goldrin during his celebration party, so he would attend to ensure that nothing happened. He then told Zenos that his job was concluded and promised to fulfill his part of their deal the next day. Following this, and Crescent threw a farewell party for Zenos at his dorm later that day. When Crescent found out the truth about Zenos, he was drunk and began lamenting the future loss of his new bro. Just then, Zenos noticed Carmilla staring daggers at the drunk idiot, so he asked why, and she said it was because he was finishing her wine. When she moved closer, panicked, but Zenos assured her that Carmilla was good. The following day, went to Becker's office to retrieve the letter he'd written for Zenos, but found an old picture instead. At the same time, all the people at Goldrin's party, including Goldrin, were passed out on the floor, and standing beside Goldrin was Becker. Before then, the party was going on without a hitch, and while speaking with Fennel, Goldrin was reminded of the past. On the day of the explosion, he had coincidentally walked by and chose to save Fennel because he looked well off. While he was healing him, Bonds took a photo, so he was forced to hire him as his first secretary when he became a professor to keep him from telling people his secret. Back in the present, Fennel walked off and Becker approached Goldrin. He congratulated him on his win and even poured him some wine, even though Goldrin indirectly mocked him. Goldrin then told him that Zenos had been a disappointment because he chose to heal demi-humans. According to him, members of his faction weren't supposed to prioritize healing the poor because not all lives had equal value. A little while later, Fennel gave a speech, and when he tried going down memory lane by talking about the incident from 13 years ago, Goldrin cut him off. Fennel assumed he'd done that because he was trying to be modest, so he finished his speech and called on Goldrin to address the people. Meanwhile, had found the photo from that night in Becker's drawer, and upon closer inspection, she spotted a young Efred and Becker's fiancé among the people. Back in the banquet hall, Goldrin regained consciousness, and Becker told him that he'd slipped poison into the wine everyone drank. He explained that the only reason Goldrin was awake was because he'd given him a smaller dose, but assured him that it was still as effective as the normal dose. Goldrin demanded to know why Becker had poisoned everyone, and Becker answered that he was trying to recreate the scene from that night 13 years ago. Goldrin became shocked and asked how Becker had found out his secret, to which Becker responded that a drunk Bonds had told him everything. He then accused Goldrin of taking innocent lives, and Goldrin argued that the people would have died even if he hadn't interfered. Becker shot back, saying he was wrong, and revealed that Efred had been among the injured people, yet he was still alive. As Goldrin stared in disbelief, Becker asked him to choose who he'd save, but Goldrin demanded that he give him the antidote. In response, Becker drank the remaining wine and told him that if he truly believed he had the antidote, then he should save him first. Having no choice, Goldrin moved towards the center of the room and began siphoning the life force from everyone in the room so he could heal himself and then Fennel. As Becker watched him work, he pointed out that Goldrin's life force was the strongest in the room, but because he was a selfish old fart, he didn't want to use it to save the people. Without a second thought, Goldrin replied that his life was more valuable than that of other healers. He was still yapping about his worth when Becker suddenly coughed up blood, and then the next moment, Zenos, and Crescent rushed into the room. Looking around, Zenos calmly stated that Becker had poisoned everyone, and asked why he'd done it. To answer her question, Becker told him about how, 13 years ago, he and his fiancée were rookie healers. He said she was always so happy whenever she talked about healing people, but then he got news that she had been caught in an explosion and died. Despite his sadness, he pushed on and continued doing the things she loved the most until Efred returned from that dinner party and told him the truth about what happened. After revealing everything to him, Efred disappeared without a trace, so he brought Zenos in to help him find proof. After listening to him, an annoyed Crescent told him to shut up and said nothing he could say would justify harming innocent people. Zenos managed to calm him down before moving to the center of the room to begin healing everyone. Becker pointed out that he was wasting his energy since he didn't know the components of the poison, but Zenos said it didn't matter. This made Becker realize that Zenos intended to continue healing everyone until the poison ran its course, and he was lost for words. And Crescent also helped, and by the time they finished, everyone was back on their feet. Well, everyone except Goldrin, who was intentionally left alone, and none of the healers wanted to help him because they had heard everything he said about them being sacrificial lambs. Taking pity on him, Zenos wrote out a bill and said that if he agreed to pay him that amount, he'd heal him. Initially, Goldrin refused, but when he realized he had no other choice, he changed his mind. Just then, Fennel told him that once he was healed, they would have a nice, long chat about everything, and the man became afraid. The next day, Zenos and visited Becker in the detention center, and he admitted that what he'd put in the wine wasn't poison. He said he only realized that someone had switched out his mixture after he drank the wine and coughed up blood. Zenos speculated that it was a Fred, and Becker agreed, saying he might have been watching the entire thing play out. This made hopeful, and she said that Becker could be released soon, but Becker didn't want that. He said he was still guilty, even though it was someone else who poisoned the wine, so he had to pay for his crimes. A little while later, Zenos and got up to leave, but Becker called out to Zenos and asked if he'd also figured out what he'd figured out. Zenos confirmed that he had, and said after looking at the facts, he had concluded that Ifred couldn't have survived what Goldrin did, so they were left with the question, who was the Ifred Becker knew? Becker then warned Zenos to be careful, saying that something else was amiss, and since he'd foiled Ifred's plans, the boy might target him next. After Zenos left, Krishna told Becker that she was jealous that Zenos came to visit him, and Becker said he was sure he did it for Amun's sake. He explained that because of his relationship with Amun, she was more affected by what happened, so bringing her there to confirm his innocence was Zenos' way of reassuring her. Later that night, the guide stood on a balcony, lamenting the fact that Zenos had once again ruined his experiment. When the wind blew his hood off, he was revealed to be a Fred, and he said he would remain a Fred for a while because the body served him well. The next day, Zenos and Lily left the Royal Hospital after bidding farewell to Crescent and Amun, and when they arrived at the clinic, they were welcomed by the Slum bosses. What do you think is the guide's endgame? Would his true identity be revealed, or would he continue the cat and mouse game with Zenos? Well, that's it for today's video. If you watched up to this point, let's confuse the others by commenting RIP Zenos. Also, check out this next video. See you next time.